Welcome to Miranda Warning's Roundtable, discussing legal issues and current events. I'm joined on the Roundtable by Liz Benjamin and Professor Vin Bonventre. Liz is the Managing Director at Marathon Strategies, a public relations and communications firm, and former host of Capital Tonight, a political and policy show focusing on New York State politics. And Professor Vin Bonventre, Distinguished Professor of Law at Albany Law School and publisher of the New York Court Watcher, devoted to commenting on the U.S. Supreme Court and the New York State Court of Appeals. This week, we have a special edition of Miranda Warnings, where we'll be discussing the New York Court of Appeals new case on redistricting. And our guests, Liz Benjamin and Vin Bonventre. Vin has written an article on his NewYorkCourtWatcher.com, and I'm going to open with a quote from Vin's New York Court Watcher.
The illustrious Vin Bonventre.
Lord.
I think you have to say that.
It's a quote from the illustrious
There you
Vin
go.
Bonventre. New York's highest court in a 4-3 decision in matter of Hoffman versus New York State Independent Redistricting Commission ordered the state's bipartisan Independent Redistricting Commission to reconvene and redraw the state's congressional district.
That was one sentence.
That's one long sentence.
How could I break it up?
And as Vince,
I like to cut my sentences down, but it was tough to break that one up.
Even clauses or anything like.
Vin's sentences read like a dissenting opinion.
Only lawyers would get that joke.
So Liz, I'll open it up with you, Liz. What do you think of Vin's quote?
That was probably not the best quote in the whole thing
No,
that you
there were
wrote.
other really good quotes.
Okay, but here, can we just say that I don't understand what a waste of time this whole exercise was. Couldn't we just have if we had just followed the rules at the beginning and we had gerrymandered
if it went back
Jesus out of the lines.
Went back to if the redistricting commission issued a second set of maps, then we wouldn't have had to go.
That's right.
I did hear a really interesting quote. I was listening to, I can't remember, WAMC commentary roundtable. I'm sorry for whoever I'm quoting, and I can't remember who it was, but it was the greedy pigs get slaughtered first. So the Democrats control the legislature, and if they are all jumping around for joy,
they got greedy.
Yeah, but they got greedy and they got slapped. Right. But now they're like, oh, goody, we have the opportunity now, and we have a court. Remember, the last court was not so friendly to them. This court, new folks on the court, or some new chief at any rate, friendly to them, great. And they have the opportunity to go back and get a second bite at the apple, and they're all jumping around and, oh, this is going to be so great. We're going to take back those GOP held House seats, and this is going to be amazing. They can grow their legislative at the state level majorities, I guess, but to what end? They already control everything.
It's a second bite at the apple that they should have had. That they should have had 2 years ago.
Had 2 years ago.
They should have. I mean, under the Constitution, they should have done it 2 years ago. And now this decision is going to be following the New York State Constitution, even though albeit a year late. And
this cost the taxpayers, I wonder.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
A lot. Useless. All I'm saying is that there's two different tracks of discussion here. Wait, hold on. There's the legal track of discussion that we could talk about the decision and all that. And then there's the political track of discussion, and the judges to this high court are politically appointed. So that's another conversation to have. And then there's the sub-A political conversation to have, which is where do we go from here, and that the Democrats better be darn careful, because if they go too far, it's not going to bode well for them.
Let's start with number one, which is what the decision actually says now. Yeah. So what the decision says is that the decision on redistricting, and this is only for the congressional districts in New York, is going to go back to the Independent Redistricting Commission, and they are to come up with the maps for the legislature to either approve or not approve.
Right, which is exactly
is that a question or a statement?
No, and that's what the court should have done in Harkenrider.
Well,
that's what it should have done. The remedy.
There wasn't time. There's a little more time now. There wasn't time because we had the election coming up so quickly. right?
Yeah,
Okay,
but
so
this-
if that's the excuse that we didn't have time because of the fast approaching elections, then that really reinforces exactly what Chief Judge Wilson was saying in the majority opinion. It was a temporary emergency measure. But the
Right.
state constitution and beyond that, the United States Supreme Court is making it clear that state courts are not supposed to be doing the redistricting. They can insist that the redistricting authorities, that is the legislature or the redistricting commission, follow the state constitution and follow the federal constitution. But courts are not supposed to be doing the redistricting, which is why I thought that the court really screwed up the first time around.
And why did they do that, do you think, Vin? I'm just curious.
Why did who do what?
Well, the first, I mean, we're talking
Which
about
one? The
second
Supreme
case.
Court?
Oh, the court, why
first
the
time.
first time around the
Because
court did it so
The
wrong?
legislature didn't follow the constitutional method of selecting congressional districts.
Or if you believe the conspiracy theories, there were people who were pulling the political strings that made them do what they did. Just saying, that's what they're, I mean,
don't
look,
have
it's a,
I
we live
don't
in a
have any
political town.
facts on that.
Oh,
There
Lord.
are no facts. Thank you, Mr. Lawyer. There are no
Yeah.
facts, Mr. Counsel.
And,
Yes.
and to Vin's point about the Supreme Court, I mean, that's what the Court of Appeals now is saying.
Yes.
That this should
That's
be
right.
going back to the constitutional method of selection, and the courts are only a last resort if goes off the rails.
Can we just say, though, we were
Yes.
speaking to somebody earlier today, you and I, who's a very smart person who follows these sorts of things, who pointed out to us that, in fact, the fallout, if maybe that's not the right word, but the cascade effect from this will impact petitions, will impact the primary date, will impact a lot of things.
Well, that's true, right? And so under this decision, the Redistricting Commission has to come back with its new maps no later than February 28th. Hopefully sooner, but no later than February 28th. But the primary petitions go out February 27th.
Mhm.
So there could be an issue of not knowing what the full membership of your district is.
Yeah, and even to be clear, like even with the timing, if they do come back before the 28th, they're cutting it awfully close. I mean, people are out there now campaigning and declaring their candidacies and whatnot. And so, and also there's the special election, of course, for the George Santos seat, which was always going to be a little bit of a mess because that individual has to run and then run again.
Well, let's talk about that district, but the Santos district. Let's talk about what happens next here, right? Because it's been directed back to the Redistricting
To the
Commission,
commission.
and they have 10 members. They need to have 7 agree.
Mm.
They couldn't do it the last time. They'll come up with their maps, and then what do you think's going to happen? Then the legislature has to agree or not agree.
Well, hopefully the Democrats on the commission will have learned their lesson, like the Democratic Party learned its lesson. And don't be too darn greedy.
But do we expect the commission to come back with a 7 out of 10 majority that
No.
agree on the maps?
No,
And then
No.
if they don't, then what happens? It goes back to the legislature.
right.
It goes to the legislature. That's right.
Which
it
then,
does,
but
it does
also-
not go to an upstate trial judge to
No.
carve up the state.
No, but also again, if the legislature had been, remember, this is always the tyranny, the minority lived, or the Democrats lived in the minority under the tyranny of the majority of the Republicans for a long time. And then when they broke free finally and took back majority and again, it was really all because of gerrymandering that the Republicans were able to hold on to the Senate for as long as they did. Then the Democrats finally gained, then lost, then gained again, and now have kept that chamber. And they started acting like, exactly the same thing that they complained
Right.
about when they were
Right.
in the minority. How dare you have such a heavy hand and draw your districts in such a way that benefits your own party members? I can't believe you would do such a thing. That's small d democratic. And then they tried to say that they weren't gerrymandering. This is just the way it should be. Like, okay.
Well, New York, I mean, unlike some other states, New York actually, and the people, through the amendment to the Constitution, sought out
Yes.
an independent, balanced commission to come up with their congressional districts, right?
That's
And
right.
so-
Arizona came up with a redistricting commission as well. And of course, a few years ago, the United States Supreme Court held that that was valid. So when the federal constitution says that the congressional redistricting is supposed to be done by the state legislature, the Supreme Court majority, in that case, Arizona versus the Arizona Redistricting Commission, the Supreme Court said, yes, they're acting on behalf of the legislature. They're allowed to do that. But again, the court made it clear, we're not saying that a court can do the redistricting.
Right.
And
that's the same thing that the Court of Appeals said. And
absolutely.
It'll go through the political process, which is what's been expected. But let's talk about what Liz raised about we do have a special congressional election coming up for the George
February, what is it?
Middle of February sometime.
Middle of February.
It's not going to be, that election's not going to be impacted by this at all.
Right.
No, but then that person has to turn around and run right away. And interestingly, the Republicans have put up a Democrat who's holding a seat as a Republican. I mean, she's a really interesting candidate. And then the Republicans have put that individual up. And then the Democrats have put up Swazi, who is a returning, sort of career politician type.
So that seat will be decided in February. Then they'll have to run potentially again. The primary will be in June rather.
Yeah.
And then
assuming they don't change the date.
Which at this point, there's no indication that they're changing. So there'll be a primary in June. Presumably, the new districts will be in place before June, so the congressional candidates know which district they're running
but
in.
the person who is running in the who wins the Santos district will then have to turn around and run in a different,
potentially
a differently configured district.
Slightly different.
That's nutso.
But
we don't find that nutso. You don't find that crazy? That's crazy. Come on, that's crazy. People don't even know who represents them anymore, as if they care.
There's
but
a provision in the redistricting rule that says no more than 2% of the district can be changed. So the craziness will be
only to
diminished.
Those poor people who live on the edge of the district. Yes, right. Sorry for you.
Yeah, their congressperson might switch. So let's talk about some of the impact on the rest of the state.
Yeah, but just for a quick second.
And the country.
Your congressperson might, well, let's just go back. New York is credited with helping the Republicans win the House in the last go round.
Yeah.
Right.
So a lot of people are going to be looking to New York. So when we say, I mean, I'm sort of making light of it, but it really isn't light that, people who are living in District A then subsequently end up in District B and they don't know who it is that they're voting for. It's going to be confusing for people. They show up at the wrong place. They get it redirected.
Well, no, they show up at the same place. Just because their district their congressional district changes, they'll still vote in the same place that they vote.
But you won't be eligible to vote in a congressional race that you no longer live in the district for.
You'll vote for it in the other one.
But you won't.
You'll
know
still
that.
be represented.
Right. So, for example, Liz is right. Whoever the incumbent was in your district may not be the congressperson anymore because your district's a little different.
Of course.
Yeah.
The voting place stays the same.
Because you're talking about an incredibly polarized political situation on the Hill in DC. I mean, in the nation, but in particular in Washington, and such closely divided situation where New York was the difference to tip the tip the scale for the GOP the last time around. There's going to be money pouring into this state for those congressional races like nobody's business.
So let's talk about that, right? Because because of the way the redistricting was done, there were a few seats that became more competitive. A lot of those went Republican.
Four of them switched over to the Republicans.
The Republican majority was only 5, right? And now it's less. So what seats are look like they're going to be
Central New York,
different. Syracuse, right?
For sure.
There's a Republican Representative
Brandon Williams,
who won in a district that went for Joe Biden.
Yeah, he's also had some health problems of late, so that comes into play.
There's one there.
There's also
who's running against him? Do we know?
I can't remember. Mannion, I think it's Mannion.
Okay.
Senator Mannion, and maybe some other folks in the Senate. I mean, in the Democratic Party, but other people have gotten out of his way, I think. But let's also remember there's a rash of retirements. People who are dropping out of the House like flies, who are like, I don't want to be here anymore.
In New York?
Including, Higgins.
Oh, Higgins. Okay.
Who's like a very long time veteran Dem.
That's out west.
That I don't think that's, I don't think that seat's up for grabs necessarily for the way that it's drawn. But, the west of the state is a lot more like the Midwest of the nation politically, more centrist or to the left of center even, as compared to, say, Brooklyn, which is one of the most, sorry, I said that wrong, right of center as compared to Brooklyn, which is one of the more left of center places in the nation. So that'll be an interesting congressional race. I think the Hudson Valley, where you've got Bowman Latimer lining up again against Lawler, that'll be an interesting one.
And Lawler's on the commission, right?
No.
Isn't Lawler on the commission?
No.
Somebody told me he was on the commission.
Congress on the
I don't
commission?
think so. No, I think somebody related to Latimer is.
And then Ryan.
Latimer's deputy.
Latimer's deputies on the commission.
On the commission.
And then you've got
that's who I'm thinking.
Also in the Hudson Valley, you've got Molinaro, Ryan.
And both of whom won very close races the last time. Molinaro's a Republican.
Special, then a turnaround, and then that was another one of those craziness.
And so depending on how those would be competitive races to begin with.
Yeah.
And depending on how, if they're redistricted a little bit, it could, move the ball one way or another. I think the Hudson Valley
you have to figure that the Dems will pick up at least 2 seats. At least 2 seats.
Conservatively, it's a presidential year. 2 years ago was not a presidential year.
Right.
Presidential years boost turnout. Right now in this state, we're 3 to 5 Dem edge. In New York City, it's like 5 to 1 Dem edge.
Yeah.
So you boost turnout and you get, more Democrats. And if you believe that people vote party line, then that's good for Democrats. I don't necessarily think that voters automatically vote party line anymore, but this is why we fight so much in terms of voting policy, like same-day voter registration or like removing ID requirements or any of the other things that you see across the nation in terms of trying to boost turnout. In fact, isn't there a bill in front of Kathy Hochul right now to change the date of local elections?
Yeah. Right. I thought she wanted to change the local elections so they would be held, everything would be held at the same time.
Yes, which is better for taxpayers and ostensibly better for voter participation. Taxpayers, because every time you roll out one of these things, it costs, right? You got to pay the poll people, you got to pay to get the machines out, you got to pay for the cookies. But still, in all seriousness, it's not great for Republicans because low turnout races are better for Republicans, and Republicans do better at the local level. So they think that this is a partisan bill, and they probably have some, there's some there.
I think the cookies are donated. Quite honestly.
And
you're going a mile a minute. You're at like 1.5 speed, just naturally. Everyone's gonna have to turn it down to like half speed, and then
people who listen to podcasts, they try to listen. They maximize their listening time by turning up the speed. And if they did that, then they would get me at like chipmunk speed.
Oh Lord!
You're maximizing my listening time just right now.
I'm trying to make you smarter, David.
I can feel.
Is your brain growing?
I can feel my brain's about to burst.
Hey, by the way, what do we think about the fact that this is the 7th time now? The 7th time since Wilson has been chief that both Conataro and Garcia are together in dissent. That was not happening.
I had
that was not happening.
I was smacked down the last time I talked about this.
Well,
why? Why were you smacked down about it?
David does not appreciate
talking about
speculation.
Empirical data, right? And Liz is just gonna.
I'm not going to, because I was appropriately chastised the last time I engaged.
Well, they dissented before, Vin.
No.
Judges are allowed to dissent.
Conataro never dissented while Fiore was chief. He was only in dissent once while he was acting chief. He's now been in dissent 7 times since Wilson became chief
What
judge.
does it take to make a trend for you, David? Mr.
That's a
Empirical?
huge,
I'm
no,
just curious.
it's a huge switch in the direction of the court. I don't think there's any way of getting around that, right? And you say, well, it's only, I mean, it's just Wilson taking over for DeFiore, and you have Halligan voting in some of these. So, but, Wilson is chief. He's turning the direction of the court around.
Well, look, when you have a 4-3 court, which we had before,
Yes.
which we had last year, and apparently we still have now 4-3, one vote is going to make a difference, right?
That's right.
But
So
didn't Halligan
but-
recused, right, for this
on this
particular
case, she
Would it have
she
come out
recused.
differently if she was there?
No,
I don't know.
No, Halligan recused in this case, and Renwick, Diane Renwick from the first department, the PJ of the first department, was in there, and she joined the majority.
Oh, so it probably wouldn't have been any different had she been there.
We don't know.
We don't know. We'll never know.
We
It's
just
okay we can't this show, we don't do any speculation. Speculation is
Oh,
fun.
okay. I'll
Form
speculate. I'll
speculation.
speculate. I think
All
she
we
would
do
have
is
joined
speculate.
Wilson.
I do too.
All we do is
I think she
That's
would have
the
joined
truth.
all
Wilson.
made up.
We
It's
talk about
all, it's all made up.
Okay.
It's all made up.
Judge Caitlin Halligan just wrote a very, very important criminal decision. She got a unanimous court, People versus Bay, to enforce the discovery rules, which, district attorneys around the state are really upset about. But she enforced them. She said, let's stop this nonsense at the trial level. Oh, the prosecution's failure to hand over the discovery materials was not prejudicial to the defendant. They said, no, that's not part of the law.
Redistricting? I'm sorry.
What's that?
What are we? I thought
I
we
don't
were
know.
talking about redistricting.
We are talking about redistricting, but now I'm talking
Vin-
about redistricting of the court itself.
Vin read a case again, and he doesn't want to.
I read.
He doesn't want it to
He
go to
doesn't
waste.
waste the
He doesn't
knowledge.
want it to go to waste. So
No,
He takes a memory and-
my son called me up and said it was the best case the Court of Appeals has decided in years.
Your son doesn't live in
He's
New
a
York.
defense counsel. Yeah.
oh, okay.
But he doesn't live in New York, I thought.
Well, no, that's my other two sons. I do have a son in New York.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I have
This
three.
is what happens. I speculate wildly.
See? That's speculation.
We get it all
Not
wrong.
based in fact.
You need to take back control.
That's fine. That's fine. Go ahead, you guys. We'll let you guys go.
Okay. Can we talk
Okay.
about the dissent in the redistricting case?
We can.
Are we going to talk about what the Court of
should-
Appeals did? Or are we just going to talk about Liz's prognostications?
No, we can talk about the dissent. But here, let me throw this out there, and then you can.
Are you going to quote again?
I'm going to quote. Yeah, this is.
I hope it's a better quote than
And
the
who
last
will
one.
you
Well,
will you be quoting again?
This is from the dissent in the Hoffman case.
Who wrote the dissent?
Judge Canatero, and
Are you quoting from the dissent or are you quoting from my
Dissent.
blog?
from the dissent. From the
Oh.
dissent. I already quoted from your blog.
Did you hear how disappointed?
You could have quoted from the dissent from my blog.
You probably, maybe you did quote this one. The majority. So here's what this is probably the strongest wording from Judge Canatero. The majority is able to reach this result. And then it says in quotes, for one reason and one reason only, because the composition of this court has changed, end quote, citing Dobbs v. Jackson
Oh,
Women's
Lord.
Health Organization
Okay.
dissent. And for that reason, he dissents. So
Okay, he probably thought, God bless him, but he probably
implies-
thought he was being cute. It's got a lot of political appeal, but he's just dead wrong. Because in the Dobbs case, the issue was exactly the same as it was in Roe versus Wade, whether or not a woman's got a right to choose. The issue in this case was very different from the
Very
issue
different.
in Harkenrider, right? So it's not for that one reason. No. Hello, Judge Carnataro. It's a different issue in this case.
There's no R. Canataro.
Canatero.
Huh?
Canataro.
What'd I
Yeah,
say,
it's
Carnataro?
okay. You added an R. An
Yeah,
extra
I know.
R. It's
I'm
okay.
sorry.
Sorry, Judge. We take
Sorry,
it back.
Judge.
We take it back.
So what do you think of the dissent here?
I thought there were a few cheap shots, and I thought their criticisms were totally misplaced. Because they spoke about, the majority is ignoring stare decisis. They are not. This is a different case with a different issue. Oh, it's only because of the change in composition of the court. No, it's not. Again, it's a different issue. The other thing is,
What about the
neither one of-
mandamus? What do you think of the mandamus, the way the mandamus was addressed?
You mean with regard to the statute of limitations?
Yeah.
Yeah. To tell you the truth, I know one of my colleagues thinks that they got it completely wrong with regard to the statute of limitations. But, I have to say, I'm tainted on that one. My own view is, if there are two possibilities with regard to the statute of limitations, and I think both sides had good arguments on the statute of limitations, go for the one that allows you to address the darn issue and settle the issue.
And I think that was the point Liz made at the last Miranda warnings when we talked about this, where
You actually listened to
I
me
listened.
David?
I listened.
What did I say?
You
What-
said
I'm sure it was something brilliant.
You would hope that they wouldn't decide on a procedural
Yeah.
way, that they would let it get to the substance.
Right.
And if
That
they
they
wanted to
wouldn't-
get
they
rid of
wouldn't
the
cop out.
case, that's what they would have done.
Right.
Yeah.
I just think,
And that's what
again,
they
I
did.
think we did the interesting for a lay person, which I'm like sort of like the lay person in the room, the canary in the coal mine, whatever, is that
I don't know about the canary in the coal mine. That's like they send down because then they're going to
die to kill
gaseous fume. If the fumes are too gaseous,
So
you're gonna.
when people look at this, the
Yeah.
general feeling or sort of the working theory of separation of powers is that the judicial branch doesn't like to meddle in the legislative branch, and the legislative branch doesn't like to meddle in the judicial branch, and that all kind of went to heck with the LaSalle mess, and then subsequently proposed KPIs for OCA and blah, 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 blah. And now I just feel like the judicial branch always everybody gets a little squeamish when it comes time to weigh in on things that are so significant for the legislative branch. Now, we are talking about the House, but it's
Well, in
like
this
it's-
case, they're deferring to the legislature
they're not referring
and the
to the legislature,
Constitution.
but sort of. But I just find it fascinating every time we get into these kind of messes where they don't have any choice but to get in. They really don't. There was no other option.
No,
They
they
had
had to
to
deal
take
with this.
They didn't have to take the case.
No, they didn't have to take the, well,
no, they
actually,
did.
I
It
think
was
they
a
did have to
3-2.
take the
It was a
case.
3-2 appellate division. I think that
They
automatically
had to take
goes
the
to the.
case. No, that's it's a
Yeah.
constitutional issue. Was
Yeah.
at the core of the case. They had to take
Right.
it.
Yeah, but this is where people start criticizing about,
People.
about
Who?
the judges, people who criticize the judicial branch.
Many people.
I think critics of judges and critics of the judicial branch writ large don't like when judges get involved in, that's to your point, where the Supreme Court says the state legislature should be drawing lines. Let's not have the judicial branch get involved in making these decisions.
Well, yeah, but that's because the federal Constitution itself is explicit on that point. It's explicit that it's up to the state legislature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The state legislature could do its job. We wouldn't have this problem.
But, so many cases at the United States Supreme Court and at the New York Court of Appeals have political implications. But that doesn't mean they have separation of powers implications. It just means that there are going to be consequences for, balancing order and liberty, government and individuals. But with regard to, the judiciary staying out of it, the doctrine is that they should stay out of issues that the Constitution specifically gives to the other branches, right? And in this particular case, the Court of Appeals is saying, hey, by the way, whatever we did the first time around, we're not going to tell you that was the wrong thing to do or the right thing to do. But one thing's for sure, we're not going to send it back to a trial judge again. We're going to send it back where our Constitution says it should be sent, and that's to the Redistricting Commission. I don't know how anybody could say that the court's wrong on that particular issue. And that was the state constitutional issue at the heart of this case. The court had to take it. Except that they could have said, the statute of limitations ran out, so we don't address the matter. They could have done that.
That would have been a serious punt.
Thank you. Yeah.
Would
But,
have been a big
courts
punt.
do that regularly.
And
If they don't want to address an issue.
So now it's going back. Hopefully they'll act quickly so that the congressional districts
And responsibly, for
and
crying out
responsibly.
loud.
Is this
Yeah.
our last conversation before the new year?
This is our last conversation before the new year. That's going to be recorded, I think, unless
Did we
you're
have a
recording
conversation about
surreptitiously.
the abortion medication in the Supreme Court yet?
We talked about that case. I guess
Yeah.
it wasn't memorable, our
No,
conversation.
That was our last
We did-
conversation. I think
we
I
did
was
talk
parked
about that.
somewhere between.
The only thing I remember about the
Albany.
discussion, the only thing I remember about the discussion is I had difficulty pronouncing that pill.
Mifepristone.
Yeah.
Most people just call it Miffy.
Yeah. Is that
Just
what we
call it-
call it? Miffy?
Those in the know, yeah. Mhm.
Oh.
There
That's
was
what
a
we call it.
fascinating story in the New York Times about the whole Dobbs decision and the sequencing of events that led up
Yeah.
to
Something tells
Right
me
up
I
to
just
that.
feel like in the new year we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about that. And we're going to be talking about a lot of other fun things. It seems like.
I think, what do you think? What's your prediction for the year ahead that what's going to be the big issue for 24?
Do you think that some Trump related? Did they agree to take a Trump related case? I can't.
Trump
remember.
related case. I don't know that they agreed yet. The special prosecutor asked for it to be
Yeah.
skip over the various appellate divisions and go straight to the Supreme Court, which I think was a smart thing to do.
Something
Yeah.
Trump related.
going
will
there,
be-
right?
With regard to presidential immunity.
Right.
Yeah.
So something Trump related will be on the docket. We'll do.
Oh, yeah.
We'll do abortion related access. What else? What else, Vin, do you think is going to pop next year? This is at the High Court. This is the Supreme Court. Not.
What do you mean the High Court? When I think of High Court, I think of the New York Court of Appeals, which
Right.
is typically a heck of a lot better than the Supreme Court.
Okay. Okay.
And I think
Pick-
what you're
pick
going to
one.
see at the Court of Appeals, what you're going to see, I think, is a continuing change in direction. Not that it's going to be a left-wing court, but I think it's going to be a court where I think the opinions are going to be better, because I think Wilson will kind of demand that.
And by better, you mean more in agreement with your own personal philosophy.
Well, that too, but that's not what I meant. No.
He means
what I meant, I
more
mean,
erudite.
look, so many of those decisions in the De Fiore era were just dreadful. I mean, they were really just dreadful.
Poorly
and I think-
written or poorly reasoned?
You didn't like the way they ended
Terribly
up, or-
reasoned.
You didn't like the way
And
they
the
ended up?
results. I mean, right off the bat, it comes to mind. People versus Tiger. They know the woman's innocent, and yet they refuse to throw out her conviction. I mean, come on. This is, and they say, well, because the statute doesn't say we could throw out a conviction when somebody had originally pled guilty. I mean,
So
come on.
now what started as a discussion about what's coming ahead, it has become Vin's airing of grievances of years past.
Truly
Yeah,
a holy
that's,
tradition.
Festivus. Yeah, that's
It's
the
Oh,
it's
Lord.
the nailing of the grievances.
The
and the
airing of-
tradition.
and
I think that's what we
have
do.
the feats of strength.
Don't we do that?
Yeah, we do that.
We do that.
We do that every day at the Bar
Yeah.
Association, the airing of grievances.
Do you
And
have
with-
anything else that you need to air?
Yes,
air?
and I
Let it
think-
out.
Yeah, and I
Let it
think
out.
with regard to the with the United States Supreme Court, I think you're actually going to see a moderating. I think you're going to see a real moderating
Oh, well, I hope
of
so.
that court. Hey,
You mean
they
what?
know
You gonna
that
get a moderator.
they know that their reputations. They know their reputations
they
in the
don't
dumpster.
care.
They
don't
know their
care.
reputations in the
You think
dumpster.
No,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to bring up a beat a dead horse, but if they
Sure.
cared about their reputation, they wouldn't have approved that garbage of an ethics policy that they
It's
did.
probably
Here's our ethics policy. No one will enforce it. We'll be self-reporting. Thanks very much.
It's probably as far as John Roberts could get from his colleagues.
So why would they moderate further?
I don't think they care.
I don't think they give two hoots about what the
Yeah.
public thinks of them. As long as
Oh,
they
I
can
totally
keep
disagree
making their
with you.
millions, they'll be fine.
Totally disagree with
Oh,
you.
but actually today I think there was a memorial for Sandra Day O'Connor today.
Yes, it was. Yeah, loved her.
There you
Did
go.
anybody read my blog on
Jeez, wow.
Sandra Day
That's
O'Connor?
like 4 blog
You know,
mentions in a
you're-
Hey, you
single,
know,
not even an hour.
unabashed.
You know, Liz, you used to say nice things about my blog.
I told you that you were gutting it for me today because you said mean things about me before we even got on the air, Vin. So that's how we are
What?
rolling. I
What
warned
did I
you.
say mean about
I
you?
warned you. I don't even remember.
Don't repeat
Well.
it. Can't be repeated. All right. Well, listen. Happy holidays. Thank you for your
This
insights.
was wonderful.
We love
so
it,
nice
Vin.
to see both of you.
And in case you didn't hear, Vin's got a blog.
Oh, Vin has a blog.
Yes.
Vin has a blog.
That's gonna be my prediction for the new year. Vin's blog is gonna take off.
What about a must read? What about a must read
for
blog?
sponsorship for his
New
blog.
York Court Watcher.
Would you it's on Vin's blog?
You can be our
Email.
first sponsor.
Okay, this was
Right,
great.
thank
Thank you. So nice to see both of you.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
This has been Miranda Warnings, a New York State Bar Association podcast. You have the right to subscribe, rate, and review.